because that feeling of being uncomfortable is actually you growing. It's you learning about yourself. It's like a snake shedding its skin. It's uncomfortable, but once the skin is gone, it's bigger, it's stronger, it's better. It's the same thing. You don't grow without that discomfort. So you just need to know that that is a tax that you have to pay to achieve anything that means something to you, because you have to be vulnerable. You have to move through that.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Thrive State Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. V, triple board certified MD and performance longevity expert. And on today's podcast, I give you a very special treat. I'm actually going to share an excerpt of something I've been working on for the past year. It has been a passion project, a project of love called the Thrive State Summit. It's going to be an online and virtual event where I host 50 of the world's thought leaders and experts in the field of mental health, of how to actually get the tools to beat chronic stress and burnout. Really, it's going to be a resource that's going to be so valuable for you. You can register for free at ThriveStateSummit.com. Now, if you are new to the podcast, I want to welcome you in. This podcast is really about elevating our life. And so I get the opportunity to bring in many of my friends who are thought leaders and world experts in the fields of mental health, resilience, longevity, relationships, business, where we come up with the tools and tactics for you to take your life to the next level. And for those who this podcast has already helped, if you are returning, thank you so much for allowing this podcast to grow. It is through your engagement, through you guys subscribing, that really helps us. So if you haven't already, please hit subscribe. Please share this podcast with your friends and family members. And whenever you get a chance, please leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you haven't already, consider picking up a copy of my book, Thrive State, at ThriveStateBook.com. It's really the pillars, the blueprint that you need to actually control your energetic state, because it is our energetic state, the frequency by which we live life through, actually becomes a signal to our DNA that actually controls our physiology, that gives us access to optimal health, longevity, and peak performance. Now, as I said before, this is an excerpt from the Thrive State Summit. It is certainly a passion project. I spent the past year interviewing 50 of the world's top leaders in mental health, emotional wellness, to really give you the tools. And on today's podcast, we'll just give you a small sample of one interview. And so if you want to listen to the entire interview, along with the entire interviews of 50 of the world expert in mental health, chronic stress, and burnout, please register now at ThriveStateSummit.com. You'll particularly want to listen and register for the summit if you are feeling the weight of chronic stress or burnout, or maybe you're grappling with persistent symptoms of anxiety or depression, or maybe even physical symptoms of fatigue, brain fog, weight gain. They're all energetically connected. If we're not looking out for our mental health, our social health, our emotional health, our spiritual health, and physical health go out the window as well. So the Thrive State Summit is something that's so near and dear to my heart. I did it because I've had so many friends in the past couple of years really suffer from the consequences of not looking after our mental health, all the way down to suicide. And so I wanted to make sure that the world has resources when dealing with mental health issues, because not only can we avoid physical, emotional, mental symptoms, but we could also end up being the very best versions of ourselves, because trust me, the ones that love you, your family, your businesses, everyone around you is just that much better when you can bring the full you to them. So I hope you enjoy this conversation, which is the excerpt, and please register at ThriveStateSummit.com. It is completely free. You're going to get so much value from it, but please enjoy this little excerpt from the Thrive State Summit. I hope to see you in the summit itself. Please enjoy this episode of the Thrive State Podcast. Welcome back to another speaker here at the Thrive State Summit. With me today, my good friend, Ben Nemtin. is actually the #1 best-selling author of What Do You Want to Do Before You Die? And star of the MTV show, The Bravery Life. He's one of the top motivational speakers in the world and also listed as a top organizational culture thought leader. As founder of the Bravery Life movement, Ben's message of radical possibility has been featured in major media, including the Oprah Winfrey Show, The Today Show, CNN, NBC, Fox, ABC, CBS, and more. Ben struggled with depression growing up and was forced to drop out of college. Searching for purpose, he created the world's greatest bucket list with 3 of his childhood friends. They borrowed a rickety RV, crisscrossed North America, achieving the unthinkable, and every time they accomplished a goal on their list, they helped a complete stranger cross something else off of their list. Ben's bucket list quest has inspired millions to believe that the impossible is truly possible. Ben and Nemtin, welcome to the Thrive State Summit.
Thank you, Kien. Great to be here and good to chat with you.
Yeah, well, I was really inspired by your story. I got the opportunity to watch you live in Chicago, sharing your keynote about how to really break people out of living a life of mediocrity and remembering to dream again. And, I just read in your bio that it seemed like many of this started from depression, back in high school. Can you talk a little bit, and knowing what you know now about mental health, can you kind of pinpoint the cause of what that depression was and how that led you into starting this Bravery Life movement with your friends?
So I grew up in Victoria, British Columbia, which is sort of by Vancouver, and I would always put a lot of pressure on myself growing up to succeed. And, in reflection, that came back to, or really the reason why I was driven to that was kind of to be cool, to look good, to impress other people. And I had this vision of what my life should be like, but I didn't realize until many years later that it wasn't really the life that I truly wanted. And I think that was what contributed in part to me getting depressed, was I was living the dream, but it wasn't my dream. And so I had this mentality of being a perfectionist, and I would worry about my performance at school. I'd worry about my performance athletically. I was on the under-19 national rugby team, and I played a high-pressure position, a fly half, so I was kicking the field goals, calling the plays. And I'd missed a big kick at the high school championship that had sort of lost us the game. And that was something I did not want to happen again at the World Cup. So I'd worry about this, at night, and I'd get anxiety, and I'd lose sleep, and I started to get crippled by this anxiety, and the loss of sleep really messed me up. Like I was stuck in this indecision a lot of times. And so I felt like I couldn't go to practice. And so I wouldn't go. And then ultimately I got dropped from the team. And I felt like I couldn't go to school. And so I dropped out of school. And I got to the point where I couldn't leave my parents' house. I became a shut-in. And I was typically someone that was very A-type. I had a ton of friends. I loved being social. And I wasn't able to leave my room. And so I was completely crippled by this depression. My parents would just try and get me to go for a 15-minute walk every day to get outside the house. And sometimes I couldn't even do that. So this was a freaky time for me, to say the least. I was terrified by just the sheer thought of how dark could the darkness go. And I thought I'd lost everything. And I didn't realize that I hadn't lost anything. I just lost touch with these parts of who I was. But I felt like I'd lost them. And I think that's really tricky. It's very hard when you go through your first mental health crisis. You feel like you are not the person you used to be, when in reality you are. You just have lost touch with these things, or these parts of you, but they don't go anywhere. You can tap back into them.
Yeah.
That time,
interrupt you real quick. Talk about perfectionism. Knowing kind of what you know now, would you say you have an idea of maybe the roots of needing to be a perfectionist growing up?
I think the root was wanting people to like me. I really cared a lot about what other people thought. And I wanted to fit in, and I wanted to be liked by people. And I wanted that sense of belonging. And none of that came from being myself.
Yeah,
I realize now, right? Like I was trying to do all these things to fit in. And when I wrote my bucket list with my 3 friends, it was the first time that I'd ever written down what I truly wanted. And then when I started to go after, it was the first time that I started to act on those things that I truly wanted. And I started to feel alive, and I started to feel excited, and I started to feel more like myself. And I realized, again, in reflection, that the bucket list was really just a device to bring me back to my true self. And that this bucket list turned into a map of all the things that I truly wanted that made me feel more alive. And the more I leaned into that, the more I followed those things, the more that I listened to my true self, the more excited about life I became, the more powerful I became, the more that life started to happen for me, the more that my dreams started to come true, and the more people stepped up to help me. And the more that I was intentional about surrounding myself with people that inspired me, and the more I was intentional about moving towards the thing that I truly wanted, the more that my life started to really unravel for me in a magical way. So that sounds very woo-woo, but for me, I've realized that when you are true to yourself, life starts to happen for you. And I also realized that I was starting to feel depressed, not starting to feel depressed. I was totally depressed, but I've noticed that because I've been through a few depressions since then, that a big part of me feeling depressed is that I am suppressing a big part of who I truly am. So whether that is I am suppressing my feelings around, or I'm inauthentic in an area of my life, like a relationship, or I'm inauthentic in my life around a job that I'm spending a lot of time doing every day, or there's something in my life that is inauthentic or not aligned with who I truly am. And as I look back in that high school, university era of my life, everything was inauthentic. Yeah. I didn't actually like rugby. Crazy. I spent so much time and all I wanted was to be on the national rugby team. I was doing it to fit in, right? I was doing it to be cool. And I did love parts of it, but actually like the high pressure, high level athletics, it wasn't really for me. I just like to do it for fun, but that level, it was just too much pressure for me. I just didn't enjoy it as much as I did playing other sports just for fun. The schoolwork that I was doing, I was going into I was studying kinesiology because I thought I play rugby, I should go into medicine, or I should go into sports therapy or something like that, sports medicine. So I went into kinesiology and I started to realize, what am I going to do with this? Like I don't know if a physiotherapist is the right thing for me. And so I started to realize, shit, these things that I was doing, they weren't actually aligned with what I truly wanted. But at the time I didn't know what I wanted. Yeah. So I got very lucky because I ran into these friends. And to be honest, it wasn't running into them. It was an intentional decision that I made, because after I got depressed, my friends pulled me out of the house. I went to work in a new town for the summer. I started meeting new types of kids. And these new types of kids were creative kids that were creating, just dreaming up things and doing them. They'd already traveled around the world. I'd never met young people like this. And I realized they gave me energy. And I started to understand that I needed to surround myself with people that inspired me, because that would give me energy to come out of this slump. And so when I came back after that summer away, I was starting to feel back to myself. I also started to talk with a therapist, which is a huge piece of the puzzle, the biggest probably. But another big piece was being intentional about the people I surrounded myself with. So I surrounded myself with people that only inspired me. There was only one kid that was inspiring, and he's a filmmaker from my neighborhood, and his name was Johnny. And so I called him up. I said, Johnny, we don't know each other very well, but you make movies. I've always wanted to make a movie. Let's make a movie. And that's when we started this process of making a movie about a bucket list and helping other people achieve their bucket list items. And this 2-week road trip that we went on to make this short film ended up lasting 10, 15 years. And I realized that this whole journey was a journey of self-discovery. It was figuring out who I was. And the bucket list was just the portal into this process of understanding who I was and what I needed to be happy and what I needed to feel fulfilled and what my life's purpose was, which is ultimately figuring out what my gifts were that were given to me that only I could act on and share those with the world. And I think that we are all given these gifts, these abilities, and these ideas that only we can act on and only we can bring to life. And we have an obligation to act on those, to share those. I know that you feel the same way about being your life's purpose is to, do your passion and share with as many people as possible. And I believe that if you don't act on those, these will be the regrets that you have on your deathbed. And if you look at research, that's what is also consistent with the research. The biggest regret we have as human beings, 76% of people on their deathbed, they regret the things they didn't do. And more specifically, the biggest regret, and this is 3/4 of the population, I wish I would have lived for me. not what other people wanted for me or not what was expected of me. And I believe that that is a cause of feeling unfulfilled and a cause of this suppression of your dreams and your gifts and your ideas, that if you don't bring those to life and they stay buried, which is what the whole project is named after, The Buried Life, which is a poem written 150 years ago that talks about this same feeling, because this is not a new feeling. This is the human condition, that we all have these buried dreams that if we don't act on them, these are the regrets we have. And so I think that causes this sense of unfulfillment that a lot of people are feeling right now. And I really don't want to confuse that with mental illness, because it's very different. But I do want to just talk about this as a feeling of discontentment that I felt, and I felt many times throughout my life, that if I'm not living authentically or aligned and walking my true original course, I start to feel depressed.
I hope you're enjoying the podcast thus far. Now, I wanted to give you a really neat resource that I've been working on for the past year. Are you living with chronic stress, burnout, or the nagging symptoms of anxiety and depression? Do you find yourself battling fatigue or brain fog, or feeling like you're not performing at your best? Well, what I've been working on all of this year is made especially for you. It is an online virtual event called the Thrive State Summit. You can register now for free at thrivestatesummit.com. But what it is this: you get to connect with and learn from 50 world-renowned thought leaders, experts, and some of your favorite celebrities. We've got people like Bruce Lipton, Vishen Lakhiani, Dave Asprey, Dr. Josh Axe, all united with a shared mission to tackle the mental health crisis that is impacting each and every one of us. Now, the Thrive State Summit isn't just another event. It is really my hope that it becomes a catalyst for change, particularly in this fast-paced world. And so what can you expect? You could expect to take home life-changing takeaways from all our experts, activation sessions to be able to bring you into states of calm and relaxation, really all the resources for you to become the best version of yourself. And finally, proceeds from the Thrive State Summit will go to 4 mental health nonprofits, including Rare Impact Fund, the Trevor Project, Good Days, Genius Recoveries. So please, if you invest in yourself, and please share this resource with your friends and family members. It's something I poured my entire heart into this past year, and I know it's going to help so many people. So register now at thrivestatesummit.com.
That is so good, and a lot to unpack there. But you mentioned something. I'm in the longevity space, and Benjamin Franklin has this quote that I love. He says, some people die at the age 25. They're just not buried until 75. And, people that I work with want to live longer. And I say to them, for what purpose? Are you just pushing back the time you were buried and you forget about living and creating a beautiful life? Now, I love what you have talked about in this bucket list, because I was going to ask you initially, some people have these masks of who they are and the things that they think that they wanted, money, a car, a house, whatever that might be on that bucket list. And how do you know when something's coming from the true you versus this potential thing you were programmed to be? But from what I'm gathering, it doesn't really matter, because you start listing all those things. And as you start doing them, I think the magic comes where you get inspired, what truly sparks that joy, that passion, that thing in you. And that's something you can feel. And that's a clue, isn't it?
Yeah. So you follow feelings versus your head. And that is the key, because, okay, look, I like to look at your bucket list, or I talk about bucket list because it's what people understand a bucket list. You get it, right? But it's not skydive, bungee jump, travel to Europe. Like, those are some of the things you could add to your bucket list, but that only encapsulates one of 10 categories of your life. So you want to think about your travel and adventure goals. And this is what I talk about in the bucket list journal, is you write your list in 10 categories. So it's travel and adventure, but it's also, how do you want to give back? Relationship goals, intellectual goals. What do you want to learn? Material goals, financial, professional, mental health, physical health. So you get a full holistic reflection of all the things that are going to bring you those feelings of joy, happiness, excitement, fulfillment. And then you have this list of things, and then you're just like a scientist. You're just experimenting. You're just trying these things to see if they make you happy, to see if you like them, to see if you get spark joy, to see if they make you excited or you feel more alive. And if you do, then you do more of that. And that's just the process. You just follow the feelings. So think about things that you're curious about. Think about things that excite you when you think about doing that thing. Think about things that make you feel more alive, and people that XYZ make you feel more alive, make you feel excited when you think about hanging out with them, or make you feel more like yourself.
Yeah.
And those are the roads to go down as you're thinking about and trying, and you're just, don't put so much weight on them. It's not about the success. You're just trying it to see if you like it. So there's no failures. If you don't do it, great. Now you can know that, okay, now I don't have to be on my deathbed and think, what if I tried it? It wasn't something that I liked, or it didn't quite pan out the way I thought. At least you learn that information. So you're just collecting data. You're trying it, you're collecting data, and then you're continuing on. And this process is you getting to know yourself. You don't get to know yourself until you try it, because you need to listen to your body, and you need to feel the feeling of, yes, this is exciting. This gives me energy. And that's what you're following. And that is your true course, right? That is what you lean into, is you do more of that. And then you might find that this thing that you start to do also starts to build momentum. And then people might start paying you to do it, right? And then XYZ. Keep in mind, it doesn't need to be your job. I think that there's like this whole movement of your purpose needs to be your job. You need to do what you love in your work, because, and yes, I do believe that that's something that is a fantastic situation to find yourself, but there's cons to turning your passion into your business.
Because you doing rugby at a time, a sport that you like, but playing it at much.
Right, exactly. It starts to be not as fun, right? Because it's now your business. It's not a creative art form anymore. You got to get revenue, right? So you can do this on the side. You can do this on the weekend, but you got to do it. You got to protect time to do these things and try these things, because that is how I believe you make your impact, but also take care of your mental health. And that's why, I talk about purpose being in my mental health toolkit as one of the things that I focus on, which are the things that bring me that sense of purpose.
So good. And everyone who gets the VIP passes for this will actually get a copy of your toolkit. One of the things you guys actually talked about in doing your bucket list, is one of the things I find is so important when it pertains to mental health as well, was as you guys were doing it, you weren't just doing it to check something off your list. You started to actually help other people check off things in theirs. And it seemed to be, not only did you start to come alive, but now you're helping the organism that is humanity, other people, to come alive. And I would imagine that sparking a little bit of additional joy, confidence, self-worth as you start to help others.
It did, and it was a different feeling for us because we'd never done that before. I'd never gone out of my way to help someone that I didn't know. And the first time we did that, it was like this shock of, whoa, what is this feeling? We just made a meaningful impact, and you could see the joy and the surprise of this unexpected gift. And the first person we helped was a guy named Brent, who he had lived in a homeless shelter for a long time, and he had started a landscaping business to get himself out of the homeless shelter, but his landscaping business relied on his truck, and his truck had recently broken down. And he had asked us that he wanted help with his bucket list item, which was bring pizzas down to the homeless shelter that he had used to live in. So we thought, how cool is this? This guy wants to give back to the homeless shelter with pizzas, and he's not asking for help with his truck, which is, his whole business and life is on the rocks because of this, truck that doesn't work. So we thought, after that interview, secretly, we got to figure out a way to get this guy a truck. So we ended up being able to pool our money. We had $480 between the four of us. This is back in 2006 in Kelowna, British Columbia. We went to a used car salesman, and we said, this is the story of Brent. He's in your neighborhood. He needs a truck. What's your cheapest truck? And he says, $2,100. And we said, well, we got $480. And he said, all right, we'll give it to you. And he gave us the truck. He paid for the insurance out of his own pocket. We drove the truck up to Brent, tossed him the keys, and he just sort of bear hugged me and started to cry. And, that was a big day for us, because we thought, this is a thing that we got to keep doing.
So good. you speak to a lot of organizations and, there are employees that are there, things like that. You speak about the varied life. You talked on this a little bit earlier. You don't have to quit your job, but have you found that this message has it inspired people that belong to organizations that are not their own in terms of how it helps with them, their personal health, their mental health, and the organizational health as well?
Yeah, so I get a ton of people that I catch up with 6 months, a year, 2 years after the keynote, or maybe, they come to a keynote a couple years later, and I hear all these incredible stories of the things that they've achieved, and they're usually very meaningful accomplishments. Things like I took my dad back to Normandy, or I took my mom to Ireland, or I asked my kids what was on their bucket list, and I promised each of my children that I was going to help them do one thing on their list this year if they, that they wanted to do with my wife and I, and we went and we took my son to learn cooking in Italy, and my daughter wanted to learn how to surf, and so it's just these really, really meaningful experiences that, I didn't pay for these things. I didn't set them up. All I did was just give them permission to do these things by connecting it to their well-being and also their performance at the organization. So then the organization gets this lift of an employee base that is living their true self and living this life that gets them energized outside of work. So outside of work, they're doing the things they love. And because there's no door between work and life, it's not really a balance of like you're tipping in and out. It's a harmony that they get these team members that come back to work and they're fired up because they've been doing things that they love outside of work. And that infuses the organization with this energy. And then the leaders buy into this idea of really investing in the human. And what that does is they prove that they care about them and they want them to achieve their dreams. And so you create this environment where people feel like they can be their true self inside of work, outside of work. And then you get peer-to-peer facilitation of dreams. So you have associates helping one another achieve their dreams. So when I go back and speak at an organization 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times, the culture shifts and you see someone have a dream and the rest of the associates do a secret GoFundMe to make it happen. Wow. You see that someone wants to learn Spanish and another associate that knows Spanish starts a Spanish class. Or you have people creating accountability partners where they're checking in on each other. Or there's a marathon club that pops up. Or the whole group goes skydiving or whatever. So
I hope you're enjoying the podcast so far. If you are, I just wanted to let you know, join our community. There's so many free resources and a great community of people that desire health, happiness, human potential, to have more in their life, more health, more energy. And when you have those two things together, you could create more happiness, more abundance, whether it be financial, romantic, all these things in your life. And if you're just starting out, you don't know where to go, just sign up for ThriveStateStarter.com, because in there you're going to get a bundle of information that includes a longevity ebook, a longevity and performance resource guide, lecture notes that come from my keynotes at Google, at Fortune 500 companies, all the insights in that keynote in lecture slide form given to you. And then finally, breathwork. I share 3 powerful breathwork exercises to access calm, which really gives you clarity and peace during the day, to access energy if you need to wake up and really motivate yourself, and finally a breathwork routine that you could do every single morning so that you could be very intentional with how you create that day. You can find all this stuff delivered free to your inbox at ThriveStateStarter.com. And our community is growing. If you want to be a part of a community of people that desire the Thrive State, that are really in Thrive State themselves and help other people along with that, you could be a part of the community. You can get group coaching from me. We do breathwork sessions, meditation sessions, and you also get to drop in and participate in podcasts in the future. You could find more about the community at mythrivestate.com. That's mythrivestate.com. PRIVESTATE.com. So check out those resources. You're not going to be disappointed. And please enjoy the remainder of this podcast.
Once you start to give people that permission to dream and also make them aware of the challenges, the barriers that stops us a lot of times unconsciously from achieving these things and the costs of that, and then give them the steps to do that, and the whole leadership team is like, yes, we want you to do these things because we know if you're not thriving, the company doesn't thrive.
Absolutely.
And that when you create an environment where people feel like they can do that, people stay and you attract the best talent. And more people, they want experiences over the benefits, over the money. They really want to live a rich life. And if you're an employer, a boss, or a leader, and you help your teammate achieve something that's so important to them, just by saying, hey, what's on your bucket list? And then checking in on that in your reviews, right? Then you're driving towards that thing, because the thing that we miss with these goals and passions and hobbies and dreams is there's no deadlines. So that's why we don't do them, because we got deadlines for everything else. So if you create accountability, just like a boss creates accountability internally with a team by checking in on them, right? You check in on the personal goal too, and you drive them towards that thing. They're going to associate that success with you as a leader and the company. That's going to build a loyalty where they're going to stay.
Wow. Amazing. Now, some people might be listening and they're not a part of these organizations, but what I could say is you can start very simply by picking up Ben's bucket list book and reaching out to some friends.
Yeah.
So that you could have accountability. Now, I listened to your keynote, and you maybe summarize the key steps because they're so simple to do, but it begins with writing them down first.
It begins with writing it down, which seems like a small step, but it's very important because it forces you to slow down and stop and think about what you actually want. So a lot of times we're living the life that we don't want for us, but we don't know. Like we're unconscious that we're not living for us because we have been taught that this is success. Right. Success is getting the car, getting this house, getting the family, working up the ladder, getting the job. And so that is success. And then we get there and we think, well, why am I not happy?
Yeah.
Because we haven't actually listened to what we truly want, or we don't know what that is. So you got to start experimenting. But before you start experimenting, you got to start thinking about what might those things be. So you stop and you write them down, because you take things that don't exist, ideas, and you make them real. You write them down on a piece of paper, and that creates accountability. Even though it seems small, you're taking something that's intangible, you're making it tangible. That's a small step in the right direction. It reminds you that it exists as well, because as you get buried by the day-to-day, you come back to your list. You're like, oh yeah, shit, this is the thing that I want to do. And so you start to course correct and go back to those things. So writing your list creates accountability. It starts to stop you enough to think about what's important to you. That's your first step. Your second step is to then share, talk about it, because then you feel accountable to the people you share them with. So if I come to you, I say, Kien, my goal, my biggest dream, you know what? It's write a book. I want to write. I know there's a book inside me, and my next book is just going to be, that's the thing. And I'm going to write it this year. And I'm going to bump into you 6 months later at a conference. You're going to be like, oh my God, Ben, how's the book coming? And I'm going to think, well, I better start writing that book, right? Like I'm going to feel accountable because I told you, and you're going to check in on me. So Dr. Gilovich out of Cornell wrote this paper called The Ideal Road Not Taken, found that you're 77% more likely to achieve your goal if you send regular updates to accountability partner, right? Just like, again, why do you update your boss with your progress? Because it works. You do it because you know you have to talk about it and tell them what you've done. Same thing. If I told you, Ken, I'm going to write a book this year, every month I'm going to send you a new chapter. I'm going to write that book, okay? You're training for a marathon. Your training partner shows up at your door. You don't want to train. You're going because they're there and you don't want to disappoint them. So accountability is so powerful. If you can share your dreams with people, do it. You want to ask for help, right? Because they're not going to help you unless you ask. And you also want to try and enroll people intentionally to be your accountability partner. So I want to ask you, can you be my accountability partner in this dream I have of writing a book? I want you to check in on me. I'm going to send you regular updates. So that is such a huge part. And the other piece of this is you need to move through fear, because fear is the number one thing that stops us. Again, this is out of Dr. Gilovich's research, and it's the fear of what other people think, or it's the fear of failure. So you need to understand that fear never goes away. You're never going to feel ready. There's never going to be the perfect time. You are going to move through that fear, because that fear is not bad. That fear is you growing and learning about yourself, and you need to get uncomfortable with being uncomfortable, because it's a muscle that everyone needs to build, because that feeling of being uncomfortable is actually you growing. It's you learning about yourself. It's like a snake shedding its skin. It's uncomfortable, but once the skin is gone, it's bigger, it's stronger, it's better. It's the same thing. You don't grow without that discomfort. So you just need to know that that is a tax that you have to pay to achieve anything that means something to you, because you have to be vulnerable. You have to move through that. And even if the outcome is not what you want, I promise you it will be net positive. I promise you something else will pop up that maybe you didn't expect as an opportunity. You will learn something unexpected. It will be a piece, it'll be like a brick in the foundation of the dream that you want to build. It will be a pivot in the right direction. All of these things will happen if you have the courage and the bravery to step forward. And that's just something that I learned trial by fire, because I was young, dumb, and broke enough to try in the beginning, because I had 3 buddies that were crazy enough to just push me to do it. But if I tried to do this journey by myself, I would not have done it. And so that was the accountability of my 3 friends that were with me. And that was also just working this muscle from a very young age of just being, you know what, screw it, I'm just going to do it. We're just going to hit the road. No one understands what we're doing. We're just going to go and we're going to try, because it'll be fun, and we'll make a little video and we'll show our friends. And unexpectedly, people wanted to help. People heard about this road trip back in 2006. They'd find our emails on our website. They'd say, hey, I saw your list item number 8, ride a bull. I can help. I saw you want to get up on a hot air balloon. I can help. I saw you want to open the 6 o'clock news. We can make that happen. And then they sent us their dreams. And you talk about this feeling that this feeling that you get once you start to do something. And all of a sudden, for the first time in my life, I was so excited to create this thing, to keep going, to follow this momentum. And so I just followed this energy with my 3 friends. And we just knew there was something special. And we stayed and we kept control of it. And we got offered a TV show in Canada, but we turned it down because they wanted to own it. And we thought, you know what? We're going to just keep doing this ourselves, because there's something special here. And we want to continue to keep control and do this on our own. And so we just kept doing it. And then finally, we took this footage that we've been filming, we cut a pilot, and the big dream was to make a TV show for MTV America. Coming from Canada, this was like the big deal, right? And we cut a pilot, we sold it to MTV America as executive producers, though, so that we could keep creative control. And we just kept believing, and we kept following this energy, and this journey continued to unravel. But if we were too scared that first night before we left on the road trip, when we went to the mechanic and the RV that we had borrowed, that he said, there's no way this will make it back. You're going to have to tow it back. You want to go for a 2-week road trip? Not coming back. And we didn't have the money to tow it back. And we sat on the curb and we thought, you know what? I remember saying to the guys, I don't think we should do this. This is like, what are we doing? We're going to how are we going to accomplish? We had 100 dreams and we're going to help 100 people in 2 weeks. Like, what are we doing? And I remember Dave said, you know what? We've come this far. We're going. And we just as easily could have just gotten stopped by the fear, just being like, this is dumb. But we didn't. And we went, and that's when the magic happened. And so when you step through the fear and into the unknown, that is a place of possibility. You don't know what's going to happen, and that's why it's scary. But that means you don't know what's going to happen, and something amazing could happen. And by forcing yourself to move through that, you start to realize, oh yeah, that fear doesn't go away. Everyone that's great, I thought that they never felt that fear, but they do. They just got comfortable with it. And that's why they're doing great things.
I hope you enjoyed that excerpt from the Thrive State Summit on this week's episode of the Thrive State podcast. If you want to listen to the full interview, along with the full interviews of the 50 thought leaders, experts, and celebrities in the mental health, emotional wellness world, please register for free at ThriveStateSummit.com. Again, if you find this podcast useful, please subscribe. Please share this episode with your friends and family members. And do us a favor by leaving us 5-star wherever podcasts or heard, it will help the show grow. And finally, if you haven't already, get the free resources. I have a bundle of longevity as well as peak performance resources to give you, which includes ebooks, lecture notes, breathwork exercises. You can get them all at thrivestatestarter.com. Thank you again. Thanks for being a part of our community and our mission to really elevate human potential. And remember always, you are your best medicine.